Given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Well, that was the former Prime Minister Liz Truss announcing her resignation in front of number 10 Downing Street. The 47-year-old former Prime Minister Liz Truss and her government, according to the Washington Post, collapsed on Thursday the 20th of October 2022 with her sudden resignation announcement after 6 turbulent weeks in office, making her the shortest serving Prime Minister of Great Britain in the history of the country. The moment, as the Washington Post continued to report, points to the utter chaos brought upon Britain by the Conservative Party government, leaving open the question of not only who will lead the country, but in what direction, for the economy, foreign policy, and the jittery stock, currency and bond markets. And now that we know who the successor is, we'll talk more about him later, inshallah, God willing. So, to get more about the background of Liz Truss's resignation, I've got in touch with a British journalist, in fact a former BBC journalist.
Hello, my name's Hugh Fraser and I'm very happy to be joining Uzma Isa Dandigo for Global Arena.
Hugh, I've got a question for you. Could you please give us the background of what's been going on in the UK politics recently?
Well, the event which is seen as leading to Liz Truss's resignation was her budget. This is when her finance minister sets the tax and spending plans for the country. Now, he came in and cut taxes, saying that this would spur economic growth, spur businesses, and would pay for itself. But the markets just didn't buy that. The country has so much spending, so much overspending at the minute, that people thought that the country couldn't pay for these tax cuts. And the pound plummeted, it went down, it was approaching $1, £1. And there was a huge hullabaloo, and eventually this led to Liz Truss's resignation after 44 days in office.
And Hugh Fraser, is it true that Liz Truss had appeared to be a weak leader and that was why she's now out?
I do think it's true that she was seen as too weak, because after her kind of failure of her budget, after all her economic plans kind of blowing up, she sacked her finance minister and appointed a new man called Jeremy Hunt, who basically just reversed everything that she had done. So her finance minister appeared to be in charge of the country, and perhaps shadowy forces behind him, maybe the Bank of England and other people, seemed to be calling all the shots, and she seemed totally powerless. Her policies were all reversed. She apologised for it. This made her seem very weak. She has very poor communication skills. And at this time, people are very, very angry and worried. They're worried how they're going to pay for their electricity. They're worried how they're going to pay for their gas, their mortgage. Many businesses are going to have to close. Some people are worried about even paying for food. And Liz Truss just did not seem up to the job. The country needs a very, very strong, unusual leader at a turbulent time like this. And Liz Truss simply isn't that person.
But a lot of people, Hugh, in the UK keep blaming her for all the economic turmoils and woes. Should you guys there in the UK honestly and truly blame her?
And of course, she didn't cause all our problems in 44 days. But if you turn on the TV right now and you watch the news programs and the commentary, people are saying that she blew up the entire economy in 44 days. She may have done some policies that weren't very well received, but she's certainly not responsible for everything that has gone wrong. That's just ridiculous. But that's how dumbed down our media is, and she's very much the convenient scapegoat, a rather hapless, talentless politician who was Prime Minister for a while. It was very convenient for a lot of people to blame her for all our problems, and she had to go.
Now the biggest question here is, where is the UK going from here, and who will take it? As of Friday the 21st of October 2022, there were about 4 or 5 front runners, depending on the report you checked, including the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. What? Are you kidding me? Was he even thinking of coming back to the very same number 10 Downing Street that he was chased away from? I don't know, but Reuters reported on that very same Friday that Boris Johnson and his former Finance Minister Rishi Sunak were the leading potential contenders to replace British Prime Minister Liz Truss, with candidates canvassing support to become Conservative Party leader in a fast-tracked contest. But later, Boris Johnson dropped out of the race, saying that it was not the right thing for him to do at that time. He also said, and I quote, "You can't govern effectively unless you have a united party in parliament." But why was it that many people started thinking that Mr. Boris Johnson could make a return? Of course, our very own Hugh Fraser from north of England has something to say about this.
Interesting twist. He might come back again now. The Conservative Party might consider he's the only person who could legitimately be Prime Minister because he won that election. If they chose another person, say Rishi Sunak, who no one in the country voted for, like the second Prime Minister in a row that wasn't chosen at the time of the election, they might have to call an election which they would lose. So they may have to have Boris back because he has some legitimacy. People at least voted Conservative thinking he would be leader. So you may see Boris back as Prime Minister within a week.
The BBC on Friday, the 21st of October 2022, reported the Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer calling for an immediate general election following Liz Truss's resignation. And the BBC continued to say a new Conservative Party leader would replace Ms Truss as Prime Minister within a week. But that doesn't mean the UK will automatically have a general election soon. So when will the general elections take place? The UK general elections, where all the 650 MPs are elected to the House of Commons, have to be held no more than 5 years apart. The last general elections took place in December 2019. So unless an earlier one is called, the next election isn't due until January 2025. Well, in Nigeria from 1999 to date, the country has been practicing democratic presidential system of government, and we have elections after every 4 years. The president also has only 2 terms in office. Is it the same thing in the UK? Well, the answer is capital no, because according to a website called Parliamentary Education Office, there is no limit to the amount of time that somebody can be Prime Minister. A Prime Minister only stops being Prime Minister if A, their party has a vote to change the leadership of their party, B, if their party does not win government at an election, or C, if they decide to resign as Prime Minister. Well, just like Liz Truss.
When a Prime Minister takes office, there's no time limit, no fixed number of terms. Their leadership stretches out in front of us. Margaret Thatcher stood down after 11 years. Tony Blair served 10. Recently, though, we've had 4 Prime Ministers in 6 years, all of them Conservatives.
Well, that's Ross Atkins of the BBC World News. In this case, there is the need for us to learn something, even briefly, about the difference between the parliamentary system of government and that of the presidential system of government. Let's bring in Dr. KABIRU SUFI, who is a lecturer at College of Arts and Preliminary Studies here in Kano State, Nigeria, who is at the same time a political and diplomatic analyst.
In terms of stability, one will say that people are of the view and the opinion that the presidential system of government is more stable in the sense that leadership is only changed during periodic elections, unless the president is impeached. There is stability, and even the impeachment of the president does not bring down the government, unlike in the parliamentary system of government, where there is a collective responsibility in the sense that when there is a problem, the Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers will have to take responsibility, and when they take responsibility, they face a vote of no confidence, and when there is a vote of no confidence, it means the government has to go. In some cases, if the government goes, it calls for a general election. Well, in some other cases, it is the party that can then replace leadership, as the case may be.
Of course, it's indubitably true that whenever something of such significant magnitude happens, the whole world reacts. So different leaders from different countries have differently commented on Ms. Truss's abrupt and sudden resignation. Here are just a few of them, and starting with Britain's great ally, that's the United States, President Joe Biden has something to say. The United States and the United Kingdom are strong allies and enduring friends, and that fact will never change. I thank Prime Minister Liz Truss for her partnership on a range of issues, including holding Russia accountable for its war against Ukraine. We will continue our close cooperation with the United Kingdom government as we work together to meet the global challenges our nations face. Coincidentally enough, and also as a rider to Mr. Biden's comments, hours before I saw his reactions, I got in touch with Professor John Edward Phillips, an American Emeritus Professor of African History at HIROSAKI University in Japan. And I asked, Professor, how can these political turmoils in the UK affect the UK-US relations?
Probably not at all. The very tight relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom is over a century old now, and it continues under Labour, Conservative, any British administration. What's likely to have much more of an effect is the American so-called midterm elections coming up next month. And if you're interested in U.S.-British relations and U.S. foreign relations in general, you should really be looking at that election.
French President Emmanuel Macron says, "We want, above all else, stability. On a personal level, I am always sad to see a colleague go." Then we got the Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin, who says, "I think stability is very important, and we would like to see the UK system within its capacity in a position to have a successor selected as quickly as possible during these times when a major war is underway on the continent in Europe." Seriously? God forbid. And we've got the Russian Foreign Ministry through its spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. She says, and I quote, "Britain has never known such a disgrace of a Prime Minister. The helmet on board the tank, the catastrophic illiteracy, and the Queen's funeral right after the audience with Truss will be what's remembered of her." By the way, Dr. Adipo Awojide is a Nigerian academic based in the UK, tweeted not long after Ms. Truss's resignation, and I quote, "Liz Truss resigns as Prime Minister after 44 days. The UK is lucky because the country can engage in economic and politics experiment and withdraw from such if it ends in chaos. Nigeria isn't so lucky. We have to wait for 4 years or 8 even. Elections have consequences. Vote competent leaders." Earlier, Professor John Edward Phillips talked about the effect of Liz Truss's resignation on the UK-US relations. So as a rider to this, ISMA'IL M. AHMAD, the head of Liberty FM KANO, talks about the same issue, but in this time around, on the rest of the world, not only after the UK-US relations. Let's have a listen to ISMA'IL M. AHMAD.
No, I don't think Britain's relationship with the outside world will change because it's not a change of party, and even if it's change of a ruling party inside Britain, the foreign policy may remain the same. And that the crisis facing the world now, I think all the parties in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, I think have a common achievement or a common goal.
But on the other hand, how did the people of Britain receive this news? Hugh Fraser also comes back to spoon feed us with the people's reaction.
So I'm currently in the north of England, and last night I went to a very British institution called the Fish and Chip Shop, where they sell our national dish, fish and chips. And I can tell you people were very angry. Everyone was talking about Liz Truss and how useless she is, how she's crashed the economy in 44 days. The owner of the fish and chip shop was saying he might have to close because he can't afford to pay £1,000 a week in energy costs, how wages are rising, that he has to pay his employees more. He just might have to go out of business. He's very worried, very angry, talking very loudly. Everyone is discussing the cost of living crisis, the inability to pay the bills that they see coming, well, it's already here, but coming even more. So people are very angry with Liz Truss, and really they're blaming her for everything. Like, she caused all these problems single-handedly in the popular narrative, in the media narrative.
What lessons should the African leaders learn, especially when it comes to overstaying in power? Well, without any iota of doubt, some leaders in Africa have for decades been clinging to power very firmly. Let's take a look at some of them. First of all, we've got the president of Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbosogo, who has been in power since 1979, making him the longest serving African president. How many years? Please do the math for me, I'm not a mathematician. While the Republic of Cameroon's President Paul Biya, who came into power in 1982, is said to be the second longest serving African leader on the continent. He grabbed power in a coup d'etat and has ruled the country ever since. Let's not forget names like Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, Jose Eduardo dos Santos of Angola, among others. All of these guys have been in power for, let's just say, decades. And many of their people are fed up with them. Well, now, as many people here in Africa believe, one beautiful thing about the leaders of mostly the West is that the moment they discover they are not widely admired or loved or cherished, or they see they are not capable of delivering, quote, the mandate on which they are elected, as Liz Truss said, they just relinquish the power and allow someone who can to just lift the country out of the misery.
Well, that's an interesting question. African leaders must learn from advanced democracies in the world. For example, now, Liz Truss gave a reason why she stepped down. She said she stepped down because she simply understands that she cannot fulfill what she promised the people of the United Kingdom. Have you ever heard that in Africa? I don't think that is possible. In Africa, a president leading a country in Africa could easily change the constitution, could easily spark violent protests, could easily spark killings between various groups or ethnic groups or regional forces, you know, because he simply wants to stay in power.
Thank you very much indeed, Malam Ismail M. Ahmad. Nice to have you on board, by the way. Well, I have put a couple of questions to him, and let's have a look at how he addresses especially the issue of the lessons that the African leaders are supposed to learn when it comes to staying or overstaying in power.
Well, it's very important to know that Britain is a very advanced democratic country which practices democracy advancedly, and that many events happened which slightly, even if it is not a very big event, it will spark the polity of the United Kingdom. But historically there has never been a single reason which forced like 3 prime ministers consecutively out of their office, and that is the Brexit in 2016.
And then I asked him about his assessment of the kind of prominence that the Western media have given to this issue. And this is what he has to say.
Well, normally whenever thing happens in the Western media, you cannot call it a British media. You can say that in the Western media, whenever something happens in the West, it normally gives a full attention. That's how the norm is.
There is an important aspect that people are interested in, which is how relevant is the UK still is to the Africans, especially Nigerians. Dr. Kabiru Said Sufi.
One can say that Nigerians consider United Kingdom as their first place of call in terms of business and education. Recently, a survey by SB Morgan has shown that Nigerians in the 2020-2021 academic session have spent about 1.9 billion pounds sterling, or have contributed 1.9 billion pounds sterling to the British economy, showing that still Nigerians consider Britain or UK as their first place of call in terms of higher degrees and what have you. And there are a lot of Nigerians contributing to the British economy. A lot of medical doctors working in the NHS, and a lot of people working in British universities. So there are a lot of Nigerians that are working in important and strategic sectors in the United Kingdom. So I can say that the United Kingdom is important to Africa and African politics, and Nigeria or Africa is also important to the working of the British society or economy.
Now, fast forward to Monday, the 24th of October 2022, Rishi Sunak emerged as new British Prime Minister. And it happened because Boris Johnson, the guy who was thought to have more likelihood and more chances of getting back into the number 10 Downing Street, as explained earlier by Hugh Fraser, dropped out of the race. And we already talked about that. But who is Rishi Sunak? What do we have to know about him, and how have both the British and the Indians been reacting to this news? We've got in touch with Jana, a British Indian woman who expresses her opinion on the appointment of Rishi Sunak. But before we go to her, let's get to have the answer to our very first question. That is, who is Rishi Sunak? And Hugh Fraser is back.
Well, Rishi Sunak's parents are Indian, but they lived in East Africa, in Tanzania and Kenya, before coming to Britain. They're quite humble origins, but his parents worked hard and sent him to a very famous public school called Winchester. So, as you may know, Boris Johnson went to Eton. Well, Winchester is almost as famous. So he had a very good start in life, going to a very good school. Then he went to Oxford, and then he worked in finance. He worked for Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, and he set up a hedge fund, which is like a very high-level fund. So he made lots of money in finance. And then he married a very, very, very wealthy Indian woman whose parents basically made billions in technology company Infosys in India. So he's very wealthy. He's one of the wealthiest people probably in England, let alone in Parliament. So some people worry he might feel a bit detached from the kind of ordinary people in the street. And he failed to win the leadership contest against Liz Truss, probably for that reason. He was already quite well known as Chancellor of the Exchequer, that's our finance minister. In all truth, he's probably pretty responsible for the mess that Britain's finances are in. But somehow he's got away with it because he seems very professional, very slick. He has this kind of banker background which the finance people trust because he's kind of one of them. It's not really his policies, it's like who he is. He's one of them. He is a financier. And so he comes in, I think, with a certain amount of credibility, and things might stabilise for a bit, but Britain's problems are not going away.
Well, Jana's speech sounds promising, optimistic, and is full of hope. All right, let's keep hoping.
Hello, Umar. This is Jana, and I'm Indian. I was born in Britain. My parents are from the Punjab, and I just want to say a big congratulations to Rishi Sunak for making Prime Minister. Obviously, nobody knew what to expect. As in the world of politics, nothing can be guaranteed, obviously, but I think everyone deserves a chance. So, I hope he can bring what we all want to the table. I know with my own family, we are very family orientated, and I think, I believe Rishi Sunak is very family orientated. So this happening on a very auspicious occasion, being Diwali, the triumph over good over evil, might just be a blessing and a sign of good things to come, hopefully. So we're all excited and we want to give him a chance to see what happens. And, as we know, the world is in turmoil right now, so any bit of good will help.
There is a great deal of debates in the UK regarding the issue of the representation of the quote-unquote underrepresented communities. Many people doubt if Rishi Sunak's election or appointment, as many people put it, is going to be a real game changer. And for us to understand more about the debates and make sense of them, I have caught up with an Indian-British professor of media and culture, Professor Shakuntala Banaji from London School of Economics. And she begins by telling us about the mood and the reaction of the people there.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking to Umar Isa Dandago on his channel Global Arena TV, and my name is Professor Shakuntala Banaji. I'm a professor of media, culture and social change at the London School of Economics in the Department of Media and Communications. What I've been asked to comment on today and what I'm going to talk to you about is the appointment of Rishi Sunak, the first Indian origin Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What's really interesting about this situation is that there are many people of Indian origin in the UK who are celebrating this very uncritically because they feel that it's a really amazing win for representation to have a person of colour, a practicing Hindu, someone with a background first in East Africa and then in Asia, beyond that, in the role of the Prime Minister.
Well, there are so many challenges ahead of Rishi Sunak now, from fixing an already broken economy, which, as many people believe, it is what it is because of the policies of the Conservative Party. Of course, Rishi Sunak's party. And that's why some people are anxious, worried, and even afraid of what's going to happen. Have a listen and take a look at what Professor Shakuntala Banaji has to say about this.
Origin here and people of colour here in the UK who are extremely anxious, and quite rightly so, about an unelected Prime Minister who's taken over at a time when his party, the Conservatives, have subjected the country to blow after blow. Economic shocks in terms of extreme austerity for more than 10 years, which see poverty levels at record highs in the UK. Extremely anti-migrant policies and an unfriendly environment, which means it's becoming increasingly difficult for people from the global south and from India included to come here and work or study without fear of being deported or asked to leave or asked to pay extortionate amounts for visas. And an atmosphere in which the new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who was the previous Home Secretary and had to resign, has come back in an unaccountable fashion and pursues dreams of deporting migrants and refugees.
Well, Sunak's Asian and Hindu background has been hailed in different quarters as a triumph for diversity in Britain. For example, prominent Indian writer and politician Dr. Shashi Tharoor claims Sunak's quote-unquote breathtaking achievement outstrips Barack Obama's election to the presidency of the United States in 2008. But Professor Priyamvada Gopal has seriously debunked Dr. Shashi Tharoor's view by citing different examples, many of which date back centuries. Professor Gopal continues to say in an opinion piece she wrote, which was published by Al Jazeera English's website on Thursday, the 27th of October 2022. Also, unlike Sunak, who was crowned by a handful of parliamentary colleagues, Obama was actually elected by voters.
To be seen. But meanwhile, there are plenty of people in India who are themselves religious and ethnic supremacists, Hindu supremacists, and who have suppressed brutally many different ethnic minority populations and religious minority populations within India. And those people are celebrating this appointment as a win for themselves, when in actual fact, it's a loss for the world. Thank you very much.
There still is a growing fear that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak may not be there for the very poor people who are suffering, simply because he is not and has not been poor. Professor Priyamvada Gopal of Cambridge University says an attention-grabbing statement In that Al Jazeera's article titled "Rishi Sunak Does Represent a Minority," that is his class of plutocrats, she says, and I quote, "Sunak is very much a British Indian prince, not just privately educated and extremely wealthy, but an ideologically committed activist for the riches and privileges of Britain's small oligarch class, to be bolstered at the expense of the many." Well, that's Professor Priyamvada Gopal. As we are nearing the end, do you want to know the type of people who are celebrating Rishi Sunak's appointment? Here, have a listen to Professor Shakuntala Banaji of London School of Economics, and she has something for us.
Something which remains to be seen. But meanwhile, there are plenty of people in India who are themselves religious and ethnic supremacists, Hindu supremacists, and who have suppressed brutally many different ethnic minority populations and religious minority populations within India. And those people are celebrating this appointment as a win for themselves, when in actual fact, it's a loss for the world. Thank you very much.
I know a lot of you will be surprised, shocked, if not transfixed, when I tell you, when you hear what people are talking about regarding how miserable life is to some people now in the UK. I can remember the time when we were kids, whenever the electricity was on, we would all happily be cheering and chanting, "NEPA!" referring to the then electricity distribution company owned by the federal government. And now in our area, Dandago, whenever the electricity is off, you will hear some guys shouting, "Mambo kyau ahaka," meaning we are better off in darkness. Of course, power shortage or even power absence is no longer news in Nigeria, but you will be astonished, astounded and flabbergasted if I tell you that the UK guys fear this so-called Nigerian experience may knock on their doors. Don't take my word for it. Take Hugh Fraser's.
Who can't pay their energy bills, and we may have blackouts. Now, you know, Umar, when I first spoke to you, you told me that you often have electricity cuts in Nigeria, and I thought that sounds pretty tough. I realized Nigeria is more of a developing country, but it has lots of domestic energy, but that was a few months ago. Well, now we are expecting to have power cuts in Britain. We really are. In Britain, which has had, the home of the Industrial Revolution, which has been developing our infrastructure for 200 years. We're going to have power cuts, and people can't pay their energy bills. So even if the electricity is available, they can't pay for it.
The newly elected or appointed Prime Minister, as some critics call him, is faced with an avalanche of problems like, first of all, the economy, strikes, and let's not forget our very own ASU strike, the 8-month-old university lecturers strike in Nigeria, which has affected us, including me. The other challenges ahead of Rishi Sunak include the war in Ukraine, which has taken a different turn. Again, China was seen as a competitor before, but now as a challenge to the West. Of course, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has to approach all those challenges. Other issues are health and social care, climate change and energy, migration, and reuniting his own Conservative Party. But all the poor people in the UK are desperately looking for is stability and economic growth. The mandate Liz Truss couldn't deliver on, which forced her to step down. And this makes me curious. Is she now at home with her hands folded, watching all the development on TV, or she has continued carrying out her parliamentary duties? If you have the answers to these questions, please drop them in the comment sections. Finally, when will Britain have a Prime Minister with an African background? Is it even possible? Well, I think impossibility is not a feature of politics. On behalf of everyone that has contributed to the production of this program, Muhammad Bello Debay and Mustafa Ibrahim, known as Fasihul Lisan, who have both served as the script editors, Malam Mahiru, the cameraman, and his crew, including the video editor. Mustafa Muhammad, the CEO of Quick Action Media Company, is the producer of this particular episode. And of course, it has been recorded inside the Quick Action Media's studio. Very good one. My name is Umar Isa Dendugo, the scriptwriter and presenter, saying goodbye. And this episode can be found on my YouTube channel, Global Arena TV, and the YouTube channel of Quick Action TV. Bye-bye.